Close enough. All right. Hey, welcome back. Man, we didn't get to be together on Sunday due to the weather, but we're thankful that we get to gather together in this warm place. You were able to make it here safely, and so praise God for that. I'm going to give you some announcements real quick before we jump into our lesson. These are going to be, some of these might be new announcements to you because we weren't here on Sunday. So this is a fresh bulletin from Sunday that just sat out there and didn't even get used. So let's see what we got. True. He didn't even have the fresh copy, but I got it right here. Hot / really actually cold off the press. All right, it's been there a while. All right, let me make sure we're good. If you were to grab a bulletin out there, it would say tonight is our family fellowship. It was supposed to be this past Sunday evening, but of course, because of the weather, that got postponed. So this coming Sunday evening will be our family fellowship. That means that we'll be having our potluck together in the fellowship hall, and then following that, we'll come in here and have our budget meeting. So make sure to join us for that. Sorry if you were really looking forward to that last week, but you get it this week, so even better. All right, so that's this coming Sunday evening. I'm trying to make sure we get the things in order here. The senior ladies are going to be doing a charcuterie board workshop. For any of you looking to getting into like a little private business, a little entrepreneur type work, you can learn how to set up, I suppose, a charcuterie board. So that's going to be February 10th in room 117 at 1 p.m. The cost is $7 per person because you kind of have to, provide the things to go on the charcuterie board. So $7 per person for that. If you have any questions, you can see Tanya, Karen, or Kimberly. It's basically just a piece of wood that they throw a bunch of snacks on top of. I mean, in a nutshell, it's just snacks put and like little meats and little cheeses. Yeah. Like what you would just put out like as you were walking by the counter and you're like, oh, I'm hungry, right? And there's a little snack for you. That's like what you put on a board. That's what they call it, charcuterie. That's basically the same thing. Yeah. So they give it all kinds of names. But anyways, there's a workshop happening for that, February 10th. No, I think how to put the stuff on the board and make it look pretty. Because it's the senior ladies. Yeah, so, But I'm sure they'll take anybody. Kind of. Oh, they don't let you come? Never mind. Anyways, that's February 10th. February 13th is our Valentine's Day banquet. The tickets per couple are $45. We're already selling those tickets, so make sure you see Miss Kay as soon as possible. Every year, she says, I just don't know if we're going to do this next year. And I'm like, why, Miss Kay? She says, because nobody signed up. And then, what do you know, somehow by the day of, there's enough people that she's satisfied. So if you would do us just a huge favor, so I don't have to hear it again, I just don't know if we're going to do it next year, right? Just go ahead and sign up if you know you're coming. Right? You need to talk to Miss Kay, who's not here. Maybe send her a text. If you know that you're going, go ahead and just shoot her the text because she's not here tonight. Yes. 13th? Yeah, it's Friday, apparently. I didn't know that. That sounds scary. You know what, guys? Just stay home. Don't even come, actually. That's scary. What? And then we will have prayer breakfast this Saturday. Yeah. Prayer breakfast this Saturday. I skipped over that one. Forgive me. And then we have on February 26th, Secret Sisters will be meeting at Christie's house again. And so that'll be at 7 p.m. on February 26th. Then you skip over to March, and we have our men's retreat, March 12th to the 14th, ladies conference, March 19th to the 21st, and then mission conference, March 29th to April 1st. So they're kind of spread out, but there's a lot of big things coming up, and so grab yourself one of those cold bulletins out there on your way out this evening, so that way you can have all those dates, and you don't have to remember everything I said. So grab one of those. Let's see. Anything else? Anything come to mind? Dates? Important events? No? Okay. Good. I didn't think so. All right. Hey, Pastor Steve, I was the last choice. I just found out this evening I was the last choice. But Pastor Steve and Miss Kay are out of town. They went up to Springfield to be a part of a grandparents' day for one of their grandkids, and so that's super exciting. In fact, I said, hey, how exciting is that? Like, you've not been able to do this because of the bus job, but now God has freed up this time for you to be able to go do this thing even 10 hours away with grandkids, so that's phenomenal. So they're there, so be praying for them because they'll have to travel back, obviously, and so be praying for them as they travel back and as they enjoy that time with family. But with that, he knew he wasn't going to be here tonight, and so I think it was Monday, maybe. He texted me and said, hey, can you teach Wednesday night? And I said, for sure. What I didn't know at the time and I discovered tonight is that he asked Brother Dave first. So there's that. There's that. And that's fine. Yeah, he supposedly had a surgery lined up for Tuesday. So Steve said, I'll ask Dakota instead. What do you know? The surgery didn't happen. Was it even scheduled? I don't know. I'm just kidding. I'm sure it was. But keep praying for that as well, because we're waiting for that appointment to happen, and of course the healing from that as well. And so I'm sure there's lots of things to pray about. We'll have our time at the end to lift up those prayer requests. But I want to take you to Ephesians 5. Ephesians 5. We've been walking through with the youth group. We've been walking through the book of Ephesians. I'm not going on to the next lesson, though they probably would like that. I'm actually going to do one that we did here just a few weeks back, and it's in Ephesians 5, and it's verses, really we're just going to focus on verses 15 and 16 this evening. So if you found your way there, read with me. Again, starting in verse 15 of Ephesians 5. It says, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. You know, when we think about time, we realize it's this non-renewable resource that is just constantly slipping through our fingers. And even when we try to grab hold of it and we want to keep a little bit of it for ourselves, there it goes again. But the thing with time, arguably, even though we often hear people say, I just don't have enough of it, I would argue that the real issue is that we often don't use it wisely. We don't often use our time wisely. And we don't need to get into specifics here, but a couple weeks ago I did ask the teens, if you didn't know this, there's a feature on your phone, on your iPhone anyways. I'm not sure about Androids. They may have something similar. But on the iPhone, you're able to look at your screen time. And you're able to see how much time you spent on your phone on specific apps. And you can go back for weeks and months and look at how much time you spent on it. And one of the students that most shocked me, the students know who it is, but you don't, and that's okay. But one of them that most shocked me, I said, hey, tell me what were your top three apps and how much time you spent on them. Now, I don't remember the exact apps that they were. I know that they were social media apps. Okay? And those three apps, between just those three and not any others, it added up to approximately 35 hours on social media. They're laughing, but for that 1 week, 35 hours. That's a full-time job, my man. That's just three apps. That's not including other apps. That's just those three specifically. I'm surprised it's that high given that the government said you can't have them at school. I don't understand where all that time's being spent. Nevertheless, I think when you just go home, it's just glued. But anyways, but that's just one example that we could give you where we don't always use our time wisely. We don't always take advantage of every moment that we have so that we would use it for the good of others and the glory of God. Right? And what's interesting, and I'm assuming that you're with me because I don't think I've ever heard any of you say, I have too much time, I just don't know what to do with it. Right? I've never heard any of you say that. I've never heard anyone say that. So I'm going to assume that y'all are with me when maybe I say that I can be one of those people who says, man, I just don't have enough time. Now, I've had this conversation with George before, and believe me, you don't want to bring that up to George because you'll lose. But, right, sometimes I'll make that statement, and I think that maybe sometimes you do as well. Right. But think about this. Oftentimes we're always wishing we had more time. In a lot of things, right? And sometimes there's small things that don't really matter all that much. I mean, think about the times that maybe you took your kids to some type of like Six Flags or SeaWorld or something, and by the end of the day, even though they're probably tired and exhausted, what do they want to do? More of it. They want to keep going. They want to come back the next day. They want to just keep riding the rides and being entertained and all the things. We think about when, for ourselves, when the alarm hits in the morning and it's going off and all we're thinking in that moment is just give me 5 more minutes. Right? Now, maybe you can get that 5 more minutes. Or on a more serious note, even when we wish we would have had more time with a loved one before they left this world and stepped into eternity. Right? There's moments in our lives that we just wish we had more time. But the reality is God doesn't give us unlimited amount of time. In fact, isn't that what makes time so precious? Time is so precious because it's something that I can't just get more of. Once this moment is passed, once this hour has passed, I can't get it back. Can't get back a single moment of it. And so that's what makes it valuable. So, really my question tonight is not going to be so much how do you use your time, or are you using your time wisely? I'm just going to ask the question, are you a fool or are you wise? And that sounds pretty harsh, but that's what Paul's getting at here. He says to live wisely is to walk wisely. It is to think wisely. It is to use our time in a way that is best to serve others and God, right? And so that is a wise person. A fool, on the other hand, doesn't take advantage of every moment, but lets it slip by. And I'm going to argue to you that this passage really goes deeper than just letting time slip by. We're going to get there. So don't go on to something else in your mind. We're going to get there. So we're on borrowed time. We're on a limited time. How do we know that? Well, we know that Psalm 139, verse 16 tells us this: your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. As the psalmist looks back at his life and looks at who God is, he says, you knew me before I was born, before I had even stepped into what we call life, even for one day, you knew all the days that were before me and what they would hold. You knew my first and you knew my last. Job also talks about this. In Job 14, verse 5, he says, since his days are determined, the number of his months is with you. You have appointed his limits so that he cannot pass. Guys, we can't just buy more time later. There is a beginning to your life and there is an end. So if it's true that we are on borrowed time and we can't get more of it, and there is an appointed day in which we will step out of this life and into eternity, then are we living as wise people of God, or are we living as fools? And you may say, well, how do I know which one I am? We're obviously going to explore that a little bit, but what does Proverbs say about the fool? How does Proverbs characterize the fool? Here's some things that it says there. It says that a fool is lazy. A fool has an uncontrolled tongue. A fool lies. A fool slanders. A fool is quarrelsome, is quick-tempered, is proud. A fool despises knowledge. A fool is reckless or careless. So this describes the fool. But oftentimes throughout Scripture, the fool is supposed to be that of an unbeliever. And the wise person is supposed to be that of a believer. And yet, when I read this description of who the fool is in Proverbs, I see a little bit of me in that. So we come back to the question, am I a fool or am I wise? How am I walking? Is what Paul might ask. If you noticed in verse 15, he started with these two words, see then, depending on the translation you have. See then. It's really as if he's saying therefore. Because what he's doing is he is establishing what he's about to say based on what has come before this very moment. Now, without a doubt, he has in mind what we might say verses 8 through 14. Certainly that's in mind. I would argue that he's really even going further back than that. And I know we've talked about this before, but just to make sure we're on the same page, Ephesians is a book that's broken into two halves. Okay? The first half, we might say, is theology. It's where we learn about Christ, what He has done, and our identity in Christ because of what He's done. And then in the last half of the book, so we're talking chapters 4 through 6, we are talking about application, or maybe the more practical side of living out that faith because of chapters 1 through 3. In fact, this was interesting. If I can find the note, I like the way that it was said, and I'm sure that I probably can't, so go figure. Here it is. The book of Ephesians has two halves. The first half, gospel roots, and the second half, gospel fruits. Gospel roots and gospel fruits. That's how this book is broken up into. So here in chapter 5, we are in the gospel roots section, or gospel fruits section. So we already know who we are in Christ. We know what it is that Christ has done for us. And now He is in the process of helping them learn how to live out this faith. And so He addresses topics like unity, the spiritual gifts that they were given. He addresses the fact that, hey, you are no longer the person you once were, but now you're a new creation. And because you're a new creation, and then he goes into kind of three areas here. He says you need to walk in light, or you need to walk in love, you need to walk in light, and you need to walk in wisdom. Because you're a new creation. You're no longer who you once were. This is now how you live. And so he jumps in there, and as we were talking about walking in light, in fact, I'll just back up and read those verses for you. He says, for you were once darkness. Did you notice he doesn't say you were in darkness? He says you were darkness. Right? You down to the very core. You were filled with it, surrounded by it. You were darkness. Right? There was no light in you at all. He says, but now you are light in the Lord. How is it that we are light? Because we are in the Lord. There's no other way about it. And then because of that, he says, walk as children of the light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore, he says, flip the page. Awake, you who sleep. Arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. It's really like Paul is giving them an invitation right here. He says, arise, you who sleep. In other words, hey, Christian, it's time to wake up. It's time to walk worthy of the calling by which you've been called. This is the moment. This is the time. And so because of all of that, because of our new identity in Christ, because we are called to walk in the light and no longer walk in darkness because that's not who we are anymore, he says, see then that you walk circumspectly. We could change out this word circumspectly for carefully. See that we walk carefully. Now, there's a lot of debate here. When it does carefully, now of course we know what it says in the New King James Version. You know what it says in the King James Version if that's what you're reading. Some translations will tell us that we need to look carefully at how we walk. And some will simply tell us to do what it says here in the New King James, that we see then that we walk carefully. So some people put carefully with walk, some people put it with look. And we could go into, who thinks what. I think the point is this. We need to be careful how we live. We need to, if we wanted to put carefully with look, we need to look carefully at our lives to see how it is that we're living. We could reword it to say we need to examine. There is a need for us to examine our lives to see how are we really living. You see, when he says walking, and this, in fact, here in verse 15 is the 6th time that he's used this word walk. But when he says walk, he's not literally talking about what your 2 feet are doing, right? He's talking about the way in which we live our lives, the way in which we conduct our lives. So he says, I want you to examine your life, your walk, carefully. Why? He goes on. He says, not as fools, but as wise. If we stop there, we could say this: a wise person examines their life. A wise person looks at the conduct of their lives and says, does this line up with Christ, or does it not? But a wise person does not just passively care nothing for how they walk. They don't just wander about through life and just say, maybe I'm walking like Christ, maybe I'm not. I don't know, and I don't really care. That's not what a wise person does. That's not what a genuine believer or follower of Christ does. No, instead, and I hope you notice the command there, right? See then that you walk carefully. Guys, we're not just floating about in life. It's not like, hey, maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. If we've listened to Pastor Steve at all over the years, you know that none of us grows closer to Christ by accident. Right? We didn't just float about and then all of a sudden, wow, I'm like Jesus, this is fantastic, but we did nothing. No, there's work that has to be done. And he says, not as fools, but as wise. And then he says this, redeeming the time. This is how wisdom is lived out. By how we consider the time, how we buy back the time. Right? That's what he means by redeeming. It's as if we are buying it back. Because he knows it's all going to be for a loss if we don't take hold of it and use it. So we need to buy back the time. Now, I told you earlier that I think this is more significant. This is more significant than just letting time slip through our hands and maybe we were idle and did nothing with it. I don't think Paul is telling us you need to be more busy. Right? I don't think Paul's is saying, hey, as long as you're more busy, then you're good to go. I don't think that's what he's getting at. I think he has something perhaps more in mind, because here's what Paul knows, and he says it in the following phrase there, because the days are evil. Paul is aware of this, that you and I live in a sin-filled world. We live in a world who has made it its mission, because it is in opposition to Christ. It always has been. But because it's in opposition of Christ, you as a follower of Christ, its job then is to distract us, to pull us away, to keep our eyes off of the one that really matters. And man, it's pretty good at it, isn't it? The world is pretty good at distracting us. In fact, just thinking about a post that Mama Boo put on Facebook today. Right? She said, man, I'm done with Facebook because what has AI done? AI has made so much fake news, so many fake videos that we watch it and we're like, oh, look, I can't believe this is happening, but it's fake. It's not even real news anymore. Right? But what does that do if we're not careful? If we're not careful, it can become a point of distraction. It can be something that might cause fear in us. It can become something that we think, man, I have to do some type of doomsday prepping, and we're forgetting about the reason we're here. You see, Paul is not just concerned with the time that slips by. Paul is more concerned with, are you living for Christ in every moment, yes or no? Every moment of your life, so that there is not a single moment that passes by that you can't say, I redeemed that, or I didn't redeem that. Did I say that right? You know what I'm saying, right? Are we redeeming every moment? Not just some moments. Because it's easy for us to spend the 35 hours on social media. Right? Some of you are like, nah, that doesn't sound easy. That sounds like a lot of work. Right? Or it's easy for us to get caught up in the fake news and to perhaps let fear creep in. It's easy for us to get caught up in TV and entertainment and all the things. It's easy for us to compromise on what we believe because we allow those things to influence us so heavily. And what does compromise look like? Compromise could look like maybe when there's a conversation taking place, and instead of you speaking up for what you know is right, what you know is true, we choose to remain silent. And don't get me wrong, I think there are times that silence, we can use wisdom and say, it's probably better to be silent in this moment. I don't disagree with that. But we allow fear of man to silence us rather than perhaps the wisdom of God. Right? That's a moment that we let go unredeemed. So when we think about whether or not we are walking wisely or foolishly, what we should be asking ourselves is, am I taking every moment that is there, and I'm not just filling it with things to do, because he's not just talking about busyness here, right? He's not just saying, hey, you know what? You just let so many moments or so much time pass by. You should have done more with that. It's not just about being busy. It's easy to be busy, right? Have you noticed in life how it's easy to be busy? In fact, I know that Mike and I, and probably several other guys, we've had the conversation over the last several years of how it seems like life is just going, and never stops. So being busy is not the goal. Being busy is not what he's aiming for. Rather, are you choosing in every moment to live like Christ, to live for Christ? So maybe that means in the moment not remaining silent when it's time to speak. Sometimes compromise can happen though when perhaps when something is either being said or maybe there's something on the TV or a video. And we begin to laugh along with what God hates. And we say, oh man, that's so funny. And what are we doing? We're compromising against what we know is right, what we know is true. If we looked back earlier into chapter 5, you would see some of the things that God is not pleased with that we so often live in, laugh alongside. Right? He says in verse 3, but fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not even be named among you, as is fitting for saints. Friends, if we're gonna walk in wisdom and redeem the time, redeem every moment to buy it back and make it useful, that means we're not just doing what the rest of the world is doing. He goes on, he says, neither filthiness nor foolish talking, right? And a lot of these things really have a sexual nature behind them when he talks about them. He goes on, he says, and here's where I think some of us could get caught up for certain. Neither filthiness nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather the giving of thanks. I could argue to you that if we are not giving thanks, perhaps those are moments we did not redeem. When we laugh along with the inappropriate joke, we are not redeeming that time, that moment. When we're speaking in such a way that God is not honored or glorified, we're not redeeming the time. Are you getting what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to give you specific examples just so that way none of us could really leave and say, well, that was a great sermon for somebody else. Like, I want you to see that there's room for improvement for all of us. There's room for Christ's likeness to take place in our lives. Paul writes this, and man, in my mind, you can feel the love coming off of the pen. You say, well, why? Because we can clearly see that it's not just, what are your circumstances, or who do you surround yourself with, right? It's not even just those things. It's are you taking every moment and using it for the glory of God? Are you taking every moment to live out your Christ, or to be more Christ-like? He says, because if you're not, then you're being foolish. Because you're not redeeming the time, you're living like the rest of the world. So are we going to do something different or not? If you go back to verse, 14? He says, awake, you who sleep. Guys, can that be my encouragement to you? Awake. Let's wake up. Let's learn to walk wisely. And how are we going to walk wisely? We're going to walk wisely, again. I've learned while teaching school, I have to repeat things a lot. And I'm not saying that you're like the kids, but you may need it several times too. But how are we going to do it? We're going to take advantage of every moment. And we're not just going to let it slip by. And that doesn't mean that we're just going to be, it doesn't mean that we're going to be ultra busy. Because I think you can be more faithful with less. Just because you have more doesn't mean that you're being faithful. And that's what we're coming down to here. Is, are we being faithful at every opportunity? In our walk, in our obedience to Christ, are we being faithful? Are we being faithful when the kids at school are all cussing and telling their inappropriate jokes, and maybe it would be easier to go along with it? But are we being faithful to say either, I can't sit here and listen to this, laugh along with this, or maybe even it's time for me to speak up and talk about Jesus? Are we being faithful? Are we being faithful in the workplace? Because those things that are happening in school are still happening in the workplace. The jokes change, but the people are still there doing the same thing. Are we being faithful in that moment? Are we being faithful when our spouse maybe says something that we don't really like and it rubs us the wrong way? Because in that moment we have the choice, am I going to be a fool, or am I going to redeem this moment? Am I going to buy it back so that I would be like Christ in this moment? Or maybe it's even in the privacy of your own bedroom when no one else is there. Are we going to redeem the time? Are we going to walk carefully? Are we going to examine our lives? Because the days are evil. The day in which we live is evil. And it's filled with all wickedness. Turn on the news. The real news, not the fake ones. Although at this point, they're probably all fake. But turn on the real news. Look at what's happening in the world. Don't spend too long there. But just look at the day in which we live. Because I don't know about you, and this is not a scary thing, but when I see the things happening in the world with people being, whether right or wrong, being gunned down in the streets, the great divide between the two political sides that's happening. What used to be good morally is now unacceptable, and what was unacceptable is now good. Right? We look at all of these things unfolding, and it just brings me back to this point of saying Jesus must be coming back soon. And that's a great thing. We want Jesus to come back soon, but when he comes back, how will he find us? Will he find us faithful? Will he find us taking advantage of every moment to live out our faith, to live out our walk with Christ? Or is he going to see us and find us compromising? Is he going to see us living like the rest of the world in foolishness and darkness? All right, so here's what we got about 10 minutes. I don't know how long Pastor Steve normally gives you for prayer. Maybe less than that, maybe more. I'm not sure. But I want to give you an opportunity to pray. I'm going to give you a few things to pray for, and then, of course, you have your prayer list as well, and maybe some of you have prayer requests to lift up too. We can take those as well. From tonight, I want to give you a few things. First, I want you to pray for eyes to walk carefully. And maybe your prayer looks like this: Lord, help me to see how I'm really walking, not just how I intend to walk. Because we all have a lot of good intentions, but how are we really walking? Pray that God would give you the eyes to see that. Pray for wisdom. We're not just talking about knowledge here, right? Knowledge puffs up. Knowledge makes us prideful, but wisdom from God is what we want, and not wisdom from the world. Notice there's a difference between the two. Wisdom from the world is what put Jesus on the cross. Right? It's sensual, it's demonic, it's earthly. That's not what we want. We want the wisdom from God. So maybe that prayer looks like, God, teach me what wisdom looks like in my life. And maybe this: pray for strength to live faithfully in the evil days. Pray for strength. And maybe that looks like this: God, help me live wisely and courageously in the days you've placed me in. Because make no mistake about it, friends, God has created you for such a time as this. You're not here by accident. Some of you, right? And we often hear this, I'm an old soul, right? Or I was born past my time or before my time, or whatever our sayings are, right? And while we all understand what you're saying, here's the reality: is God put you right where He wanted you. He planted you here to be a light in the darkness. Okay, so pray for strength in the evil days. Pray for wisdom, not just knowledge, and pray for eyes to walk carefully. Okay, so those are my 3 prayers that I want you to pray for. Are there any other requests that we can lift up? Outside of Pastor Steve and Miss Kay, who are going to be traveling back soonish. I'm not sure what day they're coming back, but pray for them. I assume by Sunday, because I haven't been told to preach, so by Sunday. Yeah, thank you for that, Dave. No, since he didn't get his surgery, I'm calling him up if that happens. Anything else though? By me? No, we've been trained, right? So. Oh, yes. Yeah. And pray for the lost, right? You have, your list if you have them with you. All right, good. Let me turn it over to y'all so that y'all can do that. Spend some time with God and with one another, and you may begin.